cold wind moved slowly across the scarred battlefield. It carried the smell of wet soil, burnt gunpowder, and death. Somewhere in the distance, artillery thundered like a storm rolling across the horizon. It was the winter of 1943, deep on the Eastern Front during World War II. The land had been fought over again and again, and now it looked less like farmland and more like a graveyard. Inside a narrow Russian trench, a group of exhausted Soviet soldiers worked silently. Their uniforms were soaked with mud and sweat, their faces pale with fatigue. The battle that had raged only hours earlier had left many of their comrades dead. Now, with trembling hands, they were digging a grave in the frozen earth. The trench walls were rough and uneven, reinforced with wooden planks that had begun to rot from moisture and cold. Snow clung to the edges of the trench, slowly melting into dirty water at the bottom. One soldier wiped his forehead and leaned against the muddy wall, breathing heavily. "Almost done," one of them muttered in a tired voice. They had already buried 2 bodies earlier that day. This would be the 3rd. Their fallen comrade lay wrapped in a blanket beside the shallow pit they were digging. His face was covered, but everyone in the trench knew who he was. Only yesterday he had been laughing with them around a small fire. War changed everything in a matter of hours. Another soldier stood at the edge of the trench, holding his rifle loosely as he watched the silent landscape beyond the parapet. The battlefield looked deserted. Smoke drifted lazily from the ruins of a nearby farmhouse. Broken trees stood like black skeletons against the gray sky. For a moment, it felt as if the war itself had paused. The soldier lowered his rifle and sighed. Maybe the Germans had pulled back. Maybe the worst of the fighting was over for the day. Behind him, the others finished digging the grave. "Help me lift him," one said quietly. 2 men carefully picked up the body of their fallen friend and lowered him into the earth. No speeches were made. There was no priest, no ceremony. Just a few tired soldiers standing silently as they looked down into the grave. One of them removed his cap. "Rest, brother," he whispered. They began covering the body with soil. What none of them knew was that they were being watched. Beyond the trench line, hidden among the broken trees and frozen ground, a small group of German soldiers moved silently forward. They were Fallschirmjäger, elite German paratroopers known for their discipline and deadly efficiency. Their faces were smeared with dirt to blend into the battlefield. Each man carried his weapon tightly, their movements controlled and quiet. They had been observing the trench for several minutes. The Soviet soldiers inside were distracted, tired, and vulnerable. The German squad leader raised his hand and signaled for his men to stop. He studied the trench through narrowed eyes. He could see the Russians moving slowly, focused on burying their dead. Perfect. He lowered his hand and made another signal. Attack. The Germans advanced quickly, but silently across the broken ground. Boots stepped carefully between debris and shell holes. Rifles were raised. Inside the trench, the Soviet soldiers had just finished covering the grave. One of them placed a wooden plank across the mound of soil to mark the spot. Then a sudden metallic clink echoed through the trench. One of the soldiers frowned. What was that? Before anyone could answer, a small dark object dropped into the trench. A grenade. "Grenade!" someone shouted. The explosion shattered the brief moment of peace. Mud, splinters, and smoke erupted into the air as the blast ripped through the narrow trench. Soldiers were thrown violently against the walls. One man collapsed instantly, his rifle slipping from his hands. Before the smoke even cleared, German Fallschirmjäger jumped down into the trench. The fight turned into chaos. Gunfire erupted at point-blank range. The narrow trench left almost no space to move. Every corner and bend became a deadly trap. A Soviet soldier raised his rifle, but a German paratrooper fired first. The shot echoed violently within the confined space. Another grenade exploded further down the trench. The Germans moved with terrifying speed. They advanced through the trench in small pairs, clearing each section methodically. One soldier would watch the corner, while the other stepped forward to check the next turn. It was brutal, close-quarters fighting. A Soviet soldier tried to fire back, but slipped in the mud. Before he could recover, a German rifle barked and he fell. The trench that had moments earlier been a place of quiet mourning was now filled with screams, gunshots, and smoke. One of the Soviet soldiers managed to fire his weapon, hitting a German attacker. The paratrooper collapsed against the trench wall, but the rest of the squad kept moving. War allowed no pause. Another Soviet soldier ran toward a bend in the trench, hoping to escape or at least find cover. His breathing was heavy, panic rising in his chest. Behind him, German boots pounded through the mud. A shot rang out. He fell forward into the dirt. The German squad continued advancing, clearing the trench section by section. Their movements were practiced, efficient, and deadly. Within minutes, the fight was nearly over. The trench had become silent again, except for the distant rumble of artillery. Smoke drifted slowly through the cold air. Bodies lay scattered along the muddy floor of the trench. The freshly dug grave stood nearby, its mound of soil already darkened by the chaos that had followed. Only one Soviet soldier remained alive. He lay wounded against the trench wall, clutching his side. Blood seeped through his uniform as he struggled to breathe. His eyes were wide with fear and disbelief. Just minutes ago, he had been burying a friend. Now he was the last survivor. The German soldiers approached cautiously, their rifles ready. One of them looked down at the wounded man. For a moment, no one spoke. The Soviet soldier tried to move but couldn't. His strength was fading quickly. He looked toward the grave they had just finished digging. 3 men were already buried there. The realization struck him slowly. This trench had become something else entirely. Another grave, perhaps the 4th. The wind blew softly across the battlefield again, carrying away the smoke of the brief but violent clash. Above the trench, the gray sky remained unchanged. War moved on without pause, leaving behind only silence and the dead. The German soldiers climbed out of the trench and continued forward toward their next objective. Behind them, the trench lay quiet once more. The grave remained where the Soviet soldiers had dug it, a simple mound of earth among many others scattered across the battlefield. In war, the line between soldier and corpse was often only a few seconds long. The battlefield slowly returned to its grim stillness. Far away, artillery thundered again. Another battle was beginning somewhere beyond the horizon.